I was dressed by wonderful women.
Well, in 2019, I read the book. Couldn't even finish it. I was just crying as I was reading it.
You were crying.
I was in tears, and I just was like, if I could be this touched by Lily Bloom's story, then I can only imagine what this could do for so many people. So I wrote Colleen.
I mean, it all started with a letter that Colleen received from you.
I'm just grateful. I'm grateful to Colleen for trusting me, for writing such a beautiful book. I'm grateful to her mother for allowing it to happen, because really this was in honor of her mom.
Chemistry together is insane.
Blake Lively could have chemistry with a rock.
I think it was the intention and the why that I wanted to make the movie, and the heart that I try to put in everything that I do.
As a man, I'm always going to come with my own biases. It's one of the reasons I was afraid to direct this movie, let alone act in it. And I wanted to make sure this film always had a female gaze.
We partnered with our dear friends at No More. It was the only way that I could direct this movie is if I had a group of women specifically behind me who are specialists in this space.
Trying to balance all these personalities on set, which can be very difficult at times.
Just tell me what it was like also collaborating with Blake.
She's a creative force. She's a genius. She was involved in every aspect of this production, and everything she touched, she made better.
Is there something about Blake that we don't know, and what was it like working with her?
She had her hands in every part of this production, and everything she touched, she made better.
I'm grateful to Blake for just being a powerhouse of a performer.
I don't think people realize how involved she was in this movie. She was extremely involved, and she really made the film better.
I heard that Ryan Reynolds wrote a scene for the film. Is that true?
I'm pretty sure that everybody at some point wrote something for the film, made the movie better. The guy's a creative genius. Everything she touches, she made better.
A sequel? Colleen says the ball is in your court. You have the right.
Oh, did she say that? I don't have any ideas yet.
We're going to take a vacation after this. I think Blake Lively's ready to direct. That's what I think.
I've been following the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni news for a very long time. And in my last video, I went over the entire Blake Lively claim against Justin Baldoni. And in today's video, I'm going to be going over Justin Baldoni's lawsuit. And let me tell you, I don't understand why she filed this complaint, because the evidence in this lawsuit is extremely damning. It paints her in a bad light. It paints her husband, Ryan Reynolds, in a bad light. It really shows the power dynamic in Hollywood and the entitlement that some of these actors and actresses have in Hollywood. All right, you guys, grab a snack, grab a blanket. We're about to get into this whole document. It is an 87-page document. I've read it cover to cover. And while I'm not going to go over the entire document, that would be a very long video, I will go over a few key points in this lawsuit. Now, it's important to note that Justin Baldoni is not currently suing Blake Lively yet. This lawsuit is a lawsuit against the New York Times for $250 million. He's suing the New York Times for libel, false light, invasion of privacy, promissory fraud, and breach of implied in fact contract. Now, why is he suing the New York Times before he goes and sues Blake Lively? His lawyer needs to find out where the New York Times got all of this information. The type of complaint that Blake Lively filed, it's not something that's readily available to the public. So someone had to have leaked it to the New York Times. They had the entire document ready to download as a PDF for anyone to read. So they need to find out who leaked that to the New York Times. Did it come from Blake Lively's camp? If it did, then there's just more evidence stacked against her. So not only is he suing the New York Times, but he is also demanding a jury trial, and he filed in the state of California. Now, in the state of California, jury trials in California can be televised if the judge presiding over the case allows it. So there is a potential for this case to be televised, whereas Blake Lively filed her complaint in the state of New York, and that is the only state that completely prohibits cameras in the courtroom. All right, so let's get into this lawsuit. Okay, so like I said, Justin Baldoni is suing for libel, false light, invasion of privacy, promissory fraud, and breach of implied in fact contract. So it starts off by saying that Justin Baldoni and his camp, they were notified at 9:46 p.m. on Friday, December 20th from a New York Times reporter, Megan Toohey, requesting plaintiff's response for an imminent 4,000-word bombshell story concerning their alleged orchestration of a smear campaign targeting Blake Lively, as well as concerns about the working environment on the set of It Ends With Us. And they gave him a 14-hour period overnight to respond. Megan Toohey, the New York Times reporter, said that you have until noon the next day on the 21st to give a reply back to the New York Times. Now, the breach of the contract that they're talking about here, the fourth thing that they're suing over, has to do with the fact that the New York Times didn't give them that amount of time. When they were asked to provide an on-the-record comment and to notify the Times of any inaccuracies by noon the following day on the 21st, it really didn't matter because the Times ended up putting the article out at 10 a.m. the next day. Any inaccuracies, any false falsehoods within that article would have been printed regardless of Justin Baldoni's response. A representative representing Baldoni promptly denied Lively's accusations, as reported by The Times, and criticized both Lively and The Times' reliance on cherry-picked and altered communication stripped of necessary context and deliberately spliced to mislead. And we're going to go over those cherry-picked and altered communications here in a second because that is very important. Justin Baldoni's team really came with all of that evidence that contradicted her claims in this lawsuit. It says that given the coordinated drop, it's apparent that The Times had been working quietly with Lively's team for weeks or even months. And this is something that they do have to prove, which is why they want to go to a jury trial. They want all of the communications, text, emails, all of that stuff from the New York Times. They want to know who was their source for that article, for that leak. The brazen disregard for journalistic integrity and fairness resulted in an article rife with inaccuracies, misrepresentations, and omissions. And that is why they're suing for breach of implied in fact contract. So it says the article's central thesis is that Justin Baldoni's team orchestrated a retaliatory public relations campaign against Lively for speaking out against sexual harassment. And they are saying that that premise is categorically false and easily disproven. They claim that Justin Baldoni consistently expressed his desire to avoid harming Lively and protect the film, but also recognized a legitimate need for public relations protection in light of Lively's false and damaging claims. And they do share some text messages here. Justin Baldoni is talking to Jen Abel and Melissa Nathan, and Justin Baldoni says, how can we say somehow that we are not doing any of this? It looks like we are trying to take her down. Melissa Nathan responds, it doesn't. They're doing all of this themselves and it's really obvious. Justin says, okay, please monitor. Things I'm worried about is that we are planting these stories, which is not true, obviously. And then Jen Abel responds to him saying that there are thousands and thousands who are calling it what it is, reacting to Blake's own actions and interviews. So all of that bad press that was happening, people reacting to the red carpet, people reacting to Blake Lively's interviews, all of that was like on TikTok and Instagram, calling it out, saying how out of touch it is, saying how her interviews and the way she's promoting the movie is not in line with what the book was about. You saw a lot of that when it went viral back in August. They're continuing on saying that The Times, which claims to have reviewed thousands of pages of text and emails, conveniently like left out a lot of context in the texts that they provided in their article. You remember in Blake Lively's suit, they shared an article, could Blake Lively be canceled? Jen Abel says, wow, you really outdid yourself with this piece. And Melissa says, that's why you hired me, right? All of this was included. What was excluded was like this sarcastic emoji, like upside down. Things that were excluded as well. This was all excluded after she says, that's why you hired me, right? I'm the best. They continue on with their conversation saying, canceled. The mail is going nuts. Melissa says, damn, this is unfair because it's also not me. They're essentially saying this is not us. And it's looking like it's us, but it's not us. Right here it says, any negative press about Lively was unequivocally a consequence of her own actions. This says Lively's marketing efforts, which included encouraging audiences to grab your friends and wear your florals while promoting her hair care and alcohol brands, were widely criticized as insensitive. And they're including screenshots of text messages from Justin Baldoni's PR team. It says, we didn't tell Jed to go after the idea that her promo was inappropriate. That happened organically. And that is something that I was saying when I was covering this back in August. Like, it all seemed organic. All of this negative press was organic. Fans of the book who popularized this book did not like the way Blake Lively was promoting. The book is about domestic violence, and they were saying that Blake Lively was promoting it as if it was Barbie. She was promoting it as if it was a rom-com. Me personally, not knowing anything about the book, not knowing anything about the movie, I thought it was a rom-com considering the marketing. They reply back, this is a crazy way to market the movie. And then they include this TikTok and it says, we had nothing to do with that. Far from being the product of a calculated smear campaign by Justin Baldoni, the backlash against Lively was an inevitable fallout of her own tone-deaf messaging and self-promotional tactics. And it included these screenshots from the tag team, from their PR team. They're including a TikTok from Perez Hilton, said none of us would ever do this. It's organic. She's blown herself up by her own actions. Then it included a Daily Mail article that says unearthed Blake Lively interview showed her using a slur for trans people. Like, that is also something that I saw. Once Blake Lively had all of this negative attention on her, you see this a lot during like cancellation campaigns. We saw this a lot back in 2020, 2021, when a lot of celebrities were getting canceled. They would shine this spotlight on the celebrity, and then other people, other internet sleuths, other netizens out there would come out and dig up even more things about Blake Lively. That's why, like, on top of all of this stuff, you had people making videos, people making TikToks, people making reels talking about Blake Lively's controversial past. That's almost like the next step when you're trying to cancel a celebrity. And I honestly don't think that like Blake Lively was ready for it. The content creator's on fire. She has handed it to them all on a plate. Just concentrate on the success of the movie. Another screenshot sharing an article saying Blake Lively fearing for her career as it ends with us with backlash. Someone said, God, I'm so over this. I'm sure Leslie thinks we placed this one as well. Leslie being Blake Lively's publicist. This conversation, this screenshot is between Leslie Joan, who is Blake Lively's publicist, and James. And I think that James works at the Daily Mail because it says right here, James Daily Mail. And they're alleging that Blake Lively's publicist seeded stories critical of Baldoni, including that Baldoni was a sexual predator. So right here, she's talking to James, who works at the Daily Mail, saying that what the fuck is going on? The whole cast doesn't like Justin. It has nothing to do with Blake. And he's saying that the reporting is that there were issues between her and Justin as well as others, and that Justin found it difficult to work with her. And she says, I'm telling you, she's a liar. They are panicking as the whole cast hates him. And then James goes to Melissa Nathan and says, she said the whole cast hates Justin. This has nothing to do with Blake. And now she's saying that Blake was sexually assaulted. Why wouldn't she say anything about it then? She knows she's full of shit. She told me the whole issue was that everybody hates Justin. Nothing about Blake and Justin. She said it has nothing to do with Blake. Again, James from the Daily Mail says, you can see that Leslie bashes Melissa and tries to get me to say that Melissa was planting stories in bad-mouthing Blake. Never once did she mention anything about the sexual harassment. She told me that she did not like Melissa on multiple occasions. Also, she has a history of lying. And this is all talking about Leslie, Blake Lively's publicist. This is between James and Leslie Sloan once again. She's saying, I know you're friends with Melissa. Yeah, we are. I'm not paid to take people down. She hasn't done anything literally anti-Blake. She told me the same thing that she told you, which is that she said that Blake's backlash is organic. And then Leslie Sloan denies this. It's not. She did nothing. He replies back that says, she was kind of off promoting it as if it was Barbie. That's something that I've been saying for a really long time. I really felt like Blake Lively was promoting this as if it was Barbie. She really wanted to have that Barbenheimer 2.0 moment with Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool and Wolverine movie and her movie It Ends With Us. And she tried to promote it as Barbie, and it was coming off as completely tone deaf to a lot of people. And all of that backlash that she was getting was incredibly organic because she's promoting the movie as if it was Barbie, and it is a movie about domestic violence. So now we get into a little bit of like this sexual harassment. Remember in Blake Lively's claim where she says that Jamie Heath showed her a video and she thought that the video was porn and she quickly like turned away, and then it ended up being like his wife giving birth, and Blake Lively was very uncomfortable about it, and her and her assistant were shocked and everything. Remember that story? Remember that complaint in her claim? Well, it says here that that claim is patently absurd. The video in question was a non-pornographic recording of Heath's wife and baby during a home birth. There was no sexual overtone. And they also include like a photo of the video in question. I've seen the photo. You can go in and look at the photo if you want to, but like the photo is in no way pornographic. To imply that the birth of a child, that a woman giving birth is pornographic, is absurd. It says that the video was shown to Lively as part of a creative discussion in preparation for the birthing scene in the film. Heath informed Lively that his wife condoned the displaying of the video. Any suggestion that Heath engaged in the exhibition of pornography or inappropriate content is false. So it did happen. He did show her the birthing video, but it was during a creative discussion, something that she conveniently left out of her complaint. In her complaint, she says that both men repeatedly entered her makeup trailer uninvited while she was undressed, including when she was breastfeeding, and that fell under the sexual harassment narrative. What she failed to include was that Blake Lively invited Baldoni into her trailer while pumping to work out their lines, and it includes a screenshot of their text message. Now, remember in her claim where she felt incredibly uncomfortable because Justin Baldoni, because he kept calling her sexy, it looks sexy. They're saying that that was exaggerated and misleading. The text exchanges between Baldoni and Lively show that Lively had insisted that her character's clothing be much sexier. When Baldoni later used the word sexy, he was just responding to her creative input, not objectifying her personally. And they included this text right here. Blake says, we'll show you both ways, but the beanie is much sexier. It's the look. And based on these text messages, this is back in May. So that whole month that they were shooting before the strikes happened, all of that time that Blake alleges that all of this happened, that is when these text messages are from. This is not from after January when filming resumed. Now, here we talk about the intimacy coordinator. It says also misleading Lively's assertion that Baldoni improvised unwanted kissing and discussed his sex life. But what the times left out was that Blake Lively did not want to meet with the intimacy coordinator. And Justin Baldoni met with the intimacy coordinator on his own and took physical notes during that meeting to relay to Blake. And these meetings were necessary because they were planning out sex scenes. And then also it goes on to say that reluctantly, he and Blake Lively would later sketch out scenes together without the intimacy coordinator. As part of those creative discussions, Baldoni and Lively sought to personalize and develop their characters, and in doing so, engaged in conversation about their individual experiences. And right here, they show some screenshots. Justin Baldoni said, "Just hired the intimacy coordinator, who I love. We'll set you up with a meeting." Blake Lively says, "I feel good. I can meet with her when we start. Thank you, though." And then Justin Baldoni sent this screenshot to a female producer of the film saying, "Just an FYI, just wanted to tell you about this. It seems she doesn't want to meet the intimacy coordinator until we start, which may mess up the workflow, but I can still meet with her, of course." The producer says, "That's fine if she doesn't want to meet her now. You'll just have to walk her through with what you and the intimacy coordinator are thinking." And then it goes into talking about how Blake Lively embarked on a hostile takeover of the film, strong-arming Sony into blessing her with ultimate control. And if you thought that all of that, all the text message contradicting, Blake Lively's complaint, contradicting the New York Times article was bad, everything that they put here is terrible. They're saying that prior to the industry strikes, right? So that month that they were working on the film, that Blake Lively alleges that all of this stuff happened, they're saying that Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni had a solid working relationship. And it was only that after the writer's strike ended and filming resumed that Blake Lively expressed any concerns about returning to work. And that is when she had that list of demands. So they lead with this when they're talking about Blake Lively's takeover of the film, It Ends With Us. Justin Baldoni is talking with his dream team, his two editors of the film. He says, "Just curious if you guys have peeked at her cut and if anything has changed." The editor says, "I've been told we are not permitted to look as per Sony." Justin Baldoni says, "Wow, okay then, the editors and director isn't allowed to look at an actress's cut. Got it. Well, here we go. We'll keep taking the high road." This is very interesting, since when did an actor or actress get their own cut of the movie? Now, I've heard of a director's cut. I've never heard of an actor's cut of the film. There's no Leonardo DiCaprio cut of Titanic. There's no Tobey Maguire cut of Spider-Man. There's no Julia Roberts cut of Erin Brockovich, right? There's director's cuts of movies that are longer and they include deleted scenes that the director wanted to include but couldn't for time or whatever. So we get director's cuts. I have never heard of an actor's cut. So let's get into Blake Lively's takeover of the film. When Wayfair and Baldoni hired Lively to appear in the film, they did not anticipate that she would execute a hostile takeover of the entire project. They are saying that Blake Lively took over the film, took over the marketing of the film, and when things didn't go her way, she ended up saying that it was Justin Baldoni's team who executed a hostile takeover, and they're alleging that she orchestrated a malicious attack through the New York Times in order to hurt the reputations, careers, and personal lives of the plaintiffs. So everybody who is suing the New York Times. It talks about how in 2019, Baldoni, through his literary agent, got in contact with the author of the book It Ends With Us and his vision in turning this book into a feature film. They say that Wayfair and Justin Baldoni bought the rights to the book on May 8th of 2019 and secured a plan to finance the project as well. And in order to do that, they partnered with Sony to co-finance and distribute the film at Wayfair's and Baldoni's assistance. And this was a requirement. This is a deal breaker. If they would not do this, then they would not go with Sony to co-finance the film. A requirement that 1% of the film's proceeds be donated to survivors of domestic violence. That 1% was ultimately earmarked for the organization No More, with which Baldoni had wanted to partner as early as September of 2022. So he partnered. He didn't have to do that. He didn't have to donate that 1% to the No More Foundation, but he did, because at the heart of it, he made this film for the right reasons. On or about December 31st, 2022, Lively agreed to take on the lead role of Lily Bloom. Lively was granted an executive producer credit, a title often associated with talent of her stature. Wayfair did not request that Lively contribute to the film in any capacity beyond her performance and this credit. So that's where it ends. She was hired on, and as part of that, she was just supposed to be the actress and she would get a producer credit. So the first example they give is Blake Lively taking over wardrobe. Now, while they say that actors are granted approval over the general look of the character, Blake Lively overstepped her boundaries, taking control of every single aspect of how Lily Bloom dressed, essentially sidelining the production's costume designer. And we know this because Blake Lively is stated on record at the red carpet saying that, all of these pieces were hers. She talked about the clothing on this project repeatedly on the red carpet. They talk about how they had to reshop her wardrobe as well. The entire wardrobe for her character had already been picked out and shopped for in preparation for the start of the film. However, Lively would send hundreds of messages to the costume designer, essentially having her reshop the entire wardrobe. Then she wanted wanted to change an aspect of her character, saying that her character had money, which would allow her to wear $5,000 shoes, causing Justin Baldoni to rethink the entire script. Not only that, but Blake Lively refused to participate in wardrobe fittings as well, and the place that she needed to go to was only 15 minutes away from her home. She refused to attend those wardrobe fittings and insisted that the wardrobe be delivered to her. They had to spend more money moving the entire wardrobe department over to her house, and it just added to the budget of the film. It says that Justin Baldoni complied in order to maintain harmony and continue with like their working relationship in order to avoid any type of delays in filming. He just said, fine, take the wardrobe to her. She has full control over her outfits in the movie. Now they talk about Blake Lively rewriting the script. Using her own words against her, they reference the red carpet interview in which Blake says, the iconic rooftop scene, my husband actually wrote it. Nobody knows that, but you now. And they're saying that this was a surprise. And when the credited screenwriter was interviewed, she graciously responded, so if I'm being told that Ryan wrote that, then great, how wonderful. There were a few little flourishes that I did not write. If those flourishes came from Ryan, I think that's wonderful. And this was also the first time that Justin Baldoni had learned that Ryan Reynolds had written a scene. He had no formal role in film's production, and he was not authorized to make any types of changes on the script. They also say that Blake Lively herself began altering the script daily, saying that, quote, the frequency of Lively's revisions alarmed the producers, directors, and the studio, who anticipated that her interference would persist every day of the shoot and disrupt the production schedule. Every day was meticulously planned, and any time that she would rewrite or request revisions on the script would halt film production. But there was a reason that they put up with it, and this is the reason. Let's read this word for word because this is really interesting. Just weeks prior, Lively's husband, Ryan Reynolds, had aggressively berated Baldoni during a meeting at their penthouse in New York, accusing him of fat-shaming Lively. Baldoni, in an effort to avoid further confrontation with Lively and Reynolds and rebuild rapport with his co-star, continued to bend to her will. Reynolds and Lively's inappropriate and humiliating berating of Baldoni, delivered perhaps intentionally as other celebrity friends were coming in and out of their penthouse, was prompted by Baldoni's reasonable inquiry into crucial information needed to ensure the safety and avoid injury during a scene. And that scene included where his character Ryle was supposed to lift up Lily. And Justin Baldoni, who has a history of back problems, he asked his trainer, how much does Lively weigh, in order to make sure that he picked her up the correct way to avoid any type of injury to himself and to Blake Lively. It says that unfortunately the trailer relayed this information to Lively, who then informed Reynolds. The confrontation that followed was so aggressive that Baldoni felt compelled to offer repeated apologies despite his question being entirely reasonable and made in good faith. Following this incident, Lively refused to perform the lift scene even though it had already been rehearsed with a stunt double. And it says Lively threatened to quit the production altogether. She gave Justin Baldoni an ultimatum, either cast someone else or work with her in the way she works. So in order to not sever their relationship with Sony and in order to not cost the production millions of dollars, they gave in to Blake Lively's every demand. It says that beyond script revisions, she also rewrote some of her lines as well as other characters' lines, effectively altering the script on a broad scale. This pattern of interference continued to disrupt the production process, often causing stress, chaos, and delays. So here it talks about Lively setting the stage for coercion by drafting a protection letter that intentionally misrepresents the nature of the conversations had between Baldoni and or Heath and Lively. And we went over like that whole meeting, the 30 points, which apparently Justin Baldoni had never even seen. Those 30 points that we went over in the last video covering Blake Lively's complaint, Justin Baldoni, it was never presented. Those 30 points were never even presented to Justin Baldoni in this meeting. In her complaint, that was the first time that they had ever seen those 30 points. They kind of go over the 17 points again and revisit a lot of the complaints that she had, going over how she didn't want to meet the intimacy coordinator, but also included that Blake Lively insisted that her and Baldoni meet at her penthouse in order to write sex scenes together. Let's talk more about Ryan Reynolds in that meeting that was held at the penthouse. As stated in this lawsuit, filming was set to resume on January 5th, but on the evening of January 4th, Justin Baldoni, James Heath, and producers Todd Black, Alex Sachs, and a representative of Sony and the film's first AD were invited to Lively and Reynolds' penthouse in New York City. They assumed they were going to be there to discuss filming and came prepared with their production materials. However, when they got there, it says that they were blindsided by Lively and Reynolds, who presented a list of grievances that were both unanticipated and troubling. It says, and I quote, Reynolds launched into a tirade berating Baldoni in what Baldoni later described as a traumatic encounter, stating he had never been spoken to like that in his life. Reynolds demanded an apology to Lively for actions that were mischaracterized and demonstrably false. When Baldoni resisted apologizing for what he had not done, Reynolds became further enraged. Everyone, including the producer Lively had asked production to engage and a representative of Sony that was in attendance, left that meeting in shock. The producer offered that in his 40-year career, he had never seen anyone speak to someone like that in a meeting. The representative mentioned that she would often think of that meeting, and her one regret is that she didn't stop Reynolds' berating of Baldoni. So this is where they talk about that 30-point list strategically positioned to appear as if it were a standalone written document. Like in her claim, there's that list of 30 things that they claim were presented to Baldoni, where no such document was ever presented to Baldoni. It was simply a meeting held so that Ryan Reynolds could yell at Justin Baldoni. So because this film was already half filmed and they couldn't risk like losing Lively and shutting down because it would cost millions of dollars. They've already poured millions of dollars into this production and then some, because remember in this first month, like Blake Lively had all of these demands that they had to pay for. They felt the pressure to sign this document and give Blake Lively whatever she wanted in order to finish the film. And this next thing right here, like it's all been terrible, but this next thing right here is super egregious, especially when it comes to like director's rights in creating a film. So it says the Directors Guild of America, the DGA, mandates a 10-week protected period during which the director of a feature film is entitled to privately edit the film and assemble their director's cut. This period is considered sacred, providing the director with uninterrupted time to creatively shape the final product, an opportunity to experiment, take risks, refine the film until it fully reflects their artistic vision. However, Blake Lively insisted on being a part of the editing process, and she requested to join Justin Baldoni in the editing bay. And what I find so interesting is that if this man had sexually harassed her, she wanted private time with him in the editing bay. It's just supposed to be Baldoni and his two editors, his dream team that he assembled to edit this film, and Blake Lively wanted to be there alone with him. If she was in fact sexually harassed and felt incredibly uncomfortable around Justin Baldoni to the point where she had to have this huge meeting and have her husband yell at him, she was more than willing to be in the editing bay with him alone because there was nobody else with her. Wayfair, Justin Baldoni, and even Sony reluctantly allowed her to be in the editing bay with him for 2 days. That's it. But she requested to spend a longer time with him. What was supposed to be only 2 days in the production bay, she ended up spending 10 days, and not satisfied with that, she requested that she be able to edit her own version of the film, now known as the Lively cut. She wanted her own time with Justin Baldoni's editors. So on their dime, on Wayfair's dime, they had to fly their editors over to Blake Lively in order to complete this process. But not satisfied with Justin Baldoni's editors, she fired them and specifically hired an editor often used by her husband, Ryan Reynolds, on his film. Additionally, she also fired the film's award-winning composer and replaced him with a composer from like Deadpool and Wolverine. And Blake Lively created her own cut of the film at Sony and Wayfair's expense. They paid for her to make her own cut. And the reason they allowed her to do that was because Blake Lively said that she would not promote this film unless this demand was met, unless she was able to create her own cut of the film. They also had to pay for a friends and family's viewing of Blake Lively's film, a film that Justin Baldoni and his editors were not able to see. They were kept in the dark when it came to Blake Lively's cut. She would not allow them to see it. So now Wayfair and Sony had 2 cuts of the film, the director's cut and the Blake Lively cut. And they were faced with this predicament, like, which film do we put out? So what they did in order to compromise, they held audience test screenings, and Justin Baldoni's cut and Blake Lively's cut were shown to these test audiences. And Blake Lively said that if Justin Baldoni's cut rated higher with audiences, that she would take a step back and let his cut go into theaters. And that's exactly what happened. Justin Baldoni's cut rated higher with test audiences. But what did Blake Lively do? Did she step back and say, okay, Justin's cut can go into theaters? No, she did not. She reneged on her promise to allow Justin Baldoni's cut to go into theaters, and instead insisted that her cut be the version released to the public, even going so far as to claim that the author of the book would also refuse to promote the film if Lively's version was not chosen. That is completely taking over this film and saying, you know what? I made this film. Screw Justin Baldoni. I mean, that is insane. That's not even like tiptoeing over the line. She completely jumped over the line and spat on it as she did so. Blake Lively allegedly completely took over this film. So now she not only did that, but now she demanded a producer credit and an undeserved PGA mark. That was not in her contract to do any of that. She strong-armed the studio and used her husband in order to have all of her demands met. And then after doing so, demanded that she get that PGA mark. So what's happened so far? She allegedly took over the wardrobe department, rewrote the scripts, had Ryan Reynolds write a scene in the movie. She took over editing. She took over composing and hired her own people to do that. She threatened not to promote the movie unless her cut of the film was the one released. And now it's time for the premiere of the film. So now what's left to do but make it seem as if this is her movie that's being released. And in order to do that, she needed to exile Justin Baldoni from his own film. And that's exactly what happened. Allegedly. Quote, Lively instructed Sony that she and the cast would not participate in any marketing or promotion of the film alongside Baldoni. She made certain that Baldoni was removed from all artwork of the posters and stripped of his A Film By credit. So he wasn't even given a directorial credit. It didn't say a film by Justin Baldoni. Why? Because it's Blake Lively's film. Her edit of the film that's being released in theaters, not Justin Baldoni, so she doesn't want his name on it. It is also alleged that at the premiere of Deadpool and Wolverine, Ryan Reynolds went up to Justin Baldoni's talent agent, William Morrison Dever, and demanded that the agent drop Baldoni, essentially trying to use his power, his authority in Hollywood to destroy Baldoni's career. Blake Lively also excluded Baldoni from all of the marketing and promotional efforts in this film, including cast promotional events, cast screening, premieres, photo shoots, and other cast campaigns. Not only was he one of the stars of the film, but he was the director, and he was excluded from all of these events. And you saw it. People saw it. We were commenting on it when this was happening during the premiere. Everyone was noticing that Justin Baldoni was absent from all of these cast events. He was holding his own interviews. He walked the carpet all by himself. And whenever the cast was together, he was not there. And people were wondering why. We saw this happen in real time. And apparently, allegedly, this is why. So not only did they want to exclude him from all of the marketing, but they also demanded that at the film's premiere, they demanded that he not be present, or Blake Lively, the author, and the rest of the cast would boycott the film and they would not walk the red carpet. And allegedly, Sony told Wayfair to concede. However, Baldoni and Wayfair Studios refused to succumb to this pressure because this was a project that they had been working on for 5 years. They financed it, produced it, they owned it. This was their property. So they refused to be absent from the red carpet premiere. And allegedly 2 days before the red carpet premiere, Justin Baldoni still didn't know whether he and his family, friends and family, people he flew out, were even going to be allowed at this premiere. Now, finally, Blake Lively permitted Justin Baldoni to attend the premiere, though their experience at the premiere was labeled as demeaning and humiliating because allegedly they were relegated to a separate theater, separate from Blake Lively, the rest of the cast. Everybody all went into a separate theater. They had to arrive at a different time as the rest of the cast, and once it was announced that Blake Lively was on her way, they needed to be hurried up and scooted off of the red carpet, and they ended up in a basement with fold-out tables and chairs, a makeshift concession stand, and bottles of soda until Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, and the rest of the cast walked the red carpet and went into their theater. After they had done that, they were allowed out of the basement and into another theater to watch the movie. Not only that, but they were not allowed to attend the after party of this movie that was financially paid for by Wayfair Studios. Wayfair had to cover a separate event for Justin Baldoni and his family and friends. So that's Justin Baldoni's lawsuit against the New York Times. It is damning. Justin Baldoni, his lawyer, they came with receipts, and this paints Blake Lively in such a terrible light, and Ryan Reynolds. And the reason I think that they took over the film was because they did want to have their Barbenheimer moment, and Justin Baldoni did not want to market this film that way. He wanted to focus on the serious issues, focus on domestic violence, talk about that. But in order to have this Barbenheimer 2.0 moment, you need to market it differently. And I don't think that Justin Baldoni would have been 100%. He wasn't 100% on board with that marketing, so they had to figure out a different way way to get there. And the first step was to strong arm him and take over production of the film. And how do you do that? How do you get this director to relinquish basically power over his film? Well, you use your power in Hollywood because you are power. You are married to a powerful man. You abuse that power and take over this film through threats, through bullying, through manipulation. And it's disgusting. It's very disgusting. It's very telling in this lawsuit where Blake Lively's PR rep, Leslie, says she didn't do anything wrong. All of this backlash towards Blake Lively is unwarranted. It must be seeded. It must be planted. It must be coming from Justin Baldoni's camp. They can't possibly wrap their heads around the fact that she did something wrong, that it was a bad decision to market this film as a romantic comedy. They can't wrap their heads around that. And that's the backlash that she essentially received, was that people did not like the way she was marketing this movie. And because they were already upset about that and they called it completely tone deaf, they focused in on other things about Blake Lively. They brought up old interviews. They brought up old quarrels. They brought up the fact that she's promoting her alcohol line alongside this movie, that she was promoting her hair care alongside this movie. But in my opinion, it seems like Blake Lively's ego is so huge, along with Ryan Reynolds' ego. Their egos are so huge that they couldn't possibly think that some strategy that they came up with could fail and garner a negative reception from the public. That couldn't possibly happen. It must be Justin Baldoni and his PR crisis team. That mindset is just wild to me. Not taking ownership that, hey, I made a mistake. I marketed this movie wrong. That's my bad. Not taking ownership over that and placing blame somewhere else. That's a level of ego that I hope I never get to. But anyways, that's it for me. What do you guys think? Let me know in those comments down below, and I'll talk to you in my next video. Bye, everyone.